Okay, so the lineup for today then is what we see on the board. We're going to finish off chapter 3. We're going to go through some importer stuff and competitive forces, and then we're going to do some review questions. And we're just going to review project 1 at the end just to make sure that everybody's set to go for submission on Saturday midnight. And one thing you'll notice, and don't get too used to it, I guess, is the videos. I posted, pretty well step by step how you get through project 1, and there's a reason for doing that, and the reason is that it's our first project, and you might need to get some skills in Excel, comfortable with the skills, and then as we move on, there'll be less and less in the videos. The videos will be shorter. Maybe just here's how you get started. Here's the right direction to go, and we'll leave it at that. So realizing it's our first project, and you need to maybe get reacquainted with Excel. That's why the videos are there. So and then in addition to that, we'll go over to class. So the first thing I wanted to do then is just briefly go through the slides. So I cut out a lot of the slides in chapter 3 that weren't relative, I guess. That were explained well in the book. Maybe some of the stuff we can go over. So starting with this diagram here. What we see in this diagram here is we see the organization and we see information technology. And as we go through the course, we'll be coming back to this kind of stuff. And what I mean by that is it's a course in using information technology in business. It's not an IT course, it's a business course. So what we're trying to do is make IT fit the business, not the business fit IT. And so in order to do that, we have to deal with several factors. It's the factors that that present change and pushback, and people's way of doing things will change, and it might feel like we're changing our business processes to fit the IT, but it's really what we're trying to get to is a point where IT fits business. Then we did mention disruptive technologies in a previous chapter, but here we are back again looking at disruptive technologies. And disruptive technologies, they not only disrupt the consumer market in general, but business specifically, because it's businesses that adopt these technologies. So for example, when personal computers first came out, when word processing software first hit, when the internet, when PageRank by Google first came out, all of these were considered disruptive technologies. They were new ways of doing things. And we know from business that the first mover has the advantage. Those that jump into these technologies first will reap benefits, but it's short-lived. Those benefits and luxuries are short-lived, and the first movers would traditionally be the inventors. They invented it, and they're going to use it first, and then they'll push it out to the masses. And then we have what's called fast followers, and those are the firms that have the size and the resources to capitalize on it. And in some cases, we see firms that aren't able to capitalize on it, don't have the human resources, don't have the training to pick up new technologies, and they will not adopt the technology. And if there's too many disruptive technologies that aren't adopted, then potentially that organization could cease to exist. We've seen that in many cases. We've seen that in the video industry. We've seen it in the entertainment industry. We've seen it in transportation. There's many organizations that just didn't adopt the technology, and now they don't exist. If we look at a bit of history here, we see that we do have a lot of technologies that disrupted and changed business forever, all the way from the microprocessor in 1971 to software as a web service, and something that we'll be talking about further, software as a service, and all the things in between that, all the things that we can look at, like the advent of internet music, internet video, and TV, and of course the World Wide Web in 1989. So when we look at software as a service, we're going to look at a bunch of acronyms. We're going to look at software as a service, and it's SAS. We're also going to look at platform as a service, and these are acronyms, of course. This industry is full of acronyms. One I came across the other day, and I heard it before, but I didn't actually stop and think about it too much, was, and we'll be talking about this in probably next week, IoT. You want to guess what that is? IoT. The I is, of course, Internet. It's the Internet of Things. I heard it before. I said, yeah, whatever, Internet of Things, yeah. But I never realized until I read an article, and I'll post the article next week, and we'll look at it. It's forecasted to be a trillion dollar industry. Internet of Things. $1 trillion industry. And the fact of the matter is, it's here now. It's like, well, when you think of it, look around, we have the Internet of Things now. And what we mean by the Internet of Things is IP, Internet Protocol enabled things, such as web cameras that you can remotely log into because they have an IP address. Things like your heating thermostat, heating and cooling thermostat in your home. If you have a thermostat that's internet enabled from, it's branded by a company called Nest. They're pretty pricey. They're about $200. But you put these in your home, and you can be anywhere, and you can raise and lower the temperature in your home. There's also light plugs you can get. Plug your light into, and it's a box that sits on top of your electrical receptacle, and you can go to it from anywhere in the world and turn on and off your lights. And then there's, robotic controlled household appliances. Those are things. So the forecast is that by 2035, which is about 20 years from now, a little bit more, we'll say, each and every one of us are going to be responsible for somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 of these things. That's why it's going to be a $1 trillion industry. Seems like a lot of things. But when I post the article and you read it, you can start counting up a lot of things, right? A lot of things that you interact with on a daily basis, like your car and everything that's in your car, all the entertainment devices you have in your car, in your home, all of the appliances you have, all of the healthcare and beauty aids that you interact with. Of course, the appliance in front of you, phone, all that stuff, right? You start counting up all these things. Yeah, it's It's going to be huge, IoT. And it's already here. So the economic impacts then. IT changes relative costs of capital and the costs of information. So what used to cost, like industry statistics and economic reports and stock market information, people used to have to subscribe to this and used to have to pay. Now it's freely available. Information just seems to be flowing and overflowing. And information systems are counted now as a factor of production. And how good your IT system really affects and determines the efficiency of your operation. So it's embedded right in the fabric of your organization. One of the concepts we talked about, we have two theories in this chapter, one called transaction cost theory and one called agency theory. We talked about this one already, where firms seek to economize on the cost of participating in the market, their transaction costs. They try to lower these, making it worthwhile for the firm to transact with other firms and, and potentially, grow their business. It may mean that people do things a different way. But if they're growing their business, it may also mean that there's room for new people. Not new people doing business the old way, but new people doing business the new way. So for a period of time, some people might be displaced, or they may need to be retrained. So the transaction cost then can be, it's a very general term, a transaction with whom, with what? A transaction with your suppliers, with your customers, with your employees. As an organization, we have a tremendous number of transactions that happen on a regular basis. The next theory is agency theory, where firms experience agency costs, the cost of managing and supervising. Because the employees can be thought of as a nexus or a collection. That's what the word nexus is, collection of self-interested parties. So if we think of, and this is kind of, into the field of human resources and organizational behavior, but if we think of employees as, looking out for themselves, they have their own self-interests in mind, then, we come together in an organization, in an agency relationship. You do this for me and I'll, work 40 hours for you. You pay me this much and I'll be happy. So, it's all a contractual arrangement. And so IT can reduce these agency costs by, growing without adding costs of supervising. And how do we do that? When we flatten the organization. We flatten the organization, we take away the supervisory costs. We hire smart people. We hire knowledge workers who can be self-directed. And so we flatten the organization, not just because of IT. Of course, IT is going to flatten the organization because now we can manage more people because we're working smarter, not harder. But the organizations have already been flattened, so not just by IT, but just because of the era that we're in. We're in the post-industrial era where we no longer believe that we need people looking over other people's shoulders, and if we don't watch them, they won't work. That's the old style of thinking, right? We're now in an era where we believe that people will work to further their self-interest, yes, but to also adhere to the contract that we have placed in front of them and that we've agreed to. And so what we mean by flattening organizations is taking the organizational pyramid and flatten it. And what we're doing is we're taking away layers of supervision that don't need to be there, because the feeling is that you've got smart people working at these lower levels. They don't need to be watched. They don't need to be told what to do. In fact, they can probably get along quite well themselves. And so IT and the fact that we're in the post-industrial era is responsible for flattening of organizations. Getting back to this change thing, it's huge. We can't forget about it. It's going to always be there. And the fact that information technology represents huge change. Change in the way we do our jobs. People have to change. Organizational structures may have to change. But here we are saying that, we're putting IT into business, not business into IT. But change is going to occur. So the internet then, if we take a technology like the internet, it's one of the many technologies that we could talk about. What does it do for an organization? Well, it increases accessibility and storage. For example, large firms deliver internal manuals to employees via corporate websites, saving millions in distribution and printing costs. So information is freely available to employees. All they have to do is log on to the company website, username, password, they get everything they need to do their job. That's one example. The information systems themselves, and this is getting back to do we fit the business to IT or IT to the business? Well, it depends. It depends on the organization and the culture that is within the organization. Are they acceptant of change? Are they an organization that wants to move ahead, to be a progressive company, to be an early adopter of new technologies? And if they do, then the buy-in is already there. So their willingness to change is already there. Then we switch over and look at Porter. What Porter did in 1985, Porter was a professor at Harvard University, and in 1985 he said, here's what business is all about. Basically, it comes down to competitive forces. And he was not the first one to identify these competitive forces, but he was the first one to kind of summarize them nicely in a diagram. So of course there was always traditional competitors, new market entrants, substitute products and services, customers and suppliers. But it was really Porter that said, here's what they look like in the diagram. And so in the middle of this diagram you have the firm battling it out with their competitors, and then all around this battle or this rivalry that's going on, we have customers, we have suppliers, we have substitute products, and we have new market entrants. And this diagram represents rivalry. It represents, competition, and it's always moving. It's never at rest. If we look at an example of this, let's say using an iPhone app development as an example. In the center we have the rivalry of iPhone app companies. And around this, so we have companies in the center battling it out with each other, trying to be one of the top apps on iPhone. But around that, what we have is barriers to entry. And right now the barriers to entry are relatively low. We have bargaining power of buyers, which is high, because you can easily find and purchase competitor apps on iTunes, which means that your app better be pretty good, because there's going to be other apps that look and do the same thing. So we can say that the buyer has a lot of power in that arena. The threat of substitute products is also high, because the Android and other smartphones, the markets are growing, and people can switch off from one platform to another and enjoy a whole new set of apps, or maybe same or similar apps. The bargaining power of suppliers then is mixed. Apple has a monopoly on iTunes, but not necessarily on the individual apps. And we also have outsourced labor for development. So, there's a lot of small developers out there that, that can be a legitimate supplier. So all, the suppliers aren't all centered in one area. They're spread out all over the world. There was, I think, some talk in your book about, a 14-year-old that developed an app, and it went to the top of the list right quick. So you don't have to be a big company to have a successful app on iTunes. So then we turn our attention to competitive advantage. We look at traditional competitors. We look at new market entrants. So our traditional competitors are in the center of that diagram, battling it out with one another. And then we have this, this thing that we have to watch out for, because at any moment in time there could be someone new enter the market. And what we want to try to do is we always want to try to maintain our competitive advantage, because that's what keeps us alive. That's what grows the organization. And of course, we have to watch out for substitute products. For example, iTunes is a substitute itself for CDs. Traditional CDs are going away. Gone away, I should say. Customers. We have to look at how easy it is for customers to switch. And if it's real easy for them to switch, then that creates a problem. That gives customers more power than we want them to have if we're the organization. Suppliers. We don't want the suppliers to have too much power. And in the iTunes app example that we used, they say it's mixed right now. There's some big suppliers out there, but there's also a lot of small suppliers. So is it high or is it low? It's kind of mixed. Some other competitive forces then that we deal with are low-cost leadership, product differentiation, focus on a market niche, strengthen customer and supplier intimacy. These are all ways that we compete, right? And when we look at some examples of this, low-cost leadership, the best example that we can use is Walmart, right? Continuously replenishing their system. They have it figured out. They have it fully automated. If we look at differentiation, we look at Google. Google is different from any other organization out there. They do things a different way. They have a competitive advantage because of their size, but they also have competitive advantage because they're different. Nike, Apple's iPhone is a different product. It's not maybe better or worse than any other smartphone, but it is different. It was the first, real smartphone, and because of that, it has millions of apps available. So, if you're an iPhone user now, are you going to switch? Tough to say, right? You look at the new iPhone 6. Yeah, all it is keeping up, right? They haven't done anything in iPhone 6 that really convinces anybody to change. So it's tough to say whether it's going to be different enough to maintain their competitive advantage. If we look at some IT-enabled new products and services that provide a competitive advantage, Amazon developed one-click shopping. Yeah, and you can patent that, right? And if you have a patent on that, then no one else can claim that they have one-click shopping. If they want to use your one-click shopping, you can license it to them. Things like golf club customization from Ping. Things like online person-to-person payment, like PayPal. Others can have that, but PayPal was the first. And some of the things that you can do on PayPal you can't do on other payment systems. Maybe you can, but not as easy, right? Like that one-click thing, that's pretty easy. So, you know, we use these services all the time, but sometimes we don't stop and think, you know, who was the first one to have it? Do they have a competitive advantage? Does anybody else have it? If we look at the 4 basic competitive strategies some of these we've already talked about, like low-cost leadership, differentiation, focus on the niche markets, customer and supplier intimacy. We can cite examples. You know, we can list them down the side here on the far right. You know, these are all examples that we commonly think of right away. If we looked at the impact of the internet on these competitive forces, you know, it's enabled by the internet. Without this mass communication system that we have, a lot of this wouldn't be possible. Then, of course, the chapter gets into the value web. And the value web is kind of different from what Porter was talking about. Porter was mainly talking about a closed system where, you know, your suppliers and your customers are outside of what you do, and, you know, they have power or they don't have power. They can disrupt the rivalry that's going on in the center. But then there's this value web that's presented in chapter 3 as well. And they're saying that with the value web, your value chain can be linked to the value chain of other suppliers and distributors and customers. So your systems will actually be connected. Potentially your suppliers will be able to see what you're doing. Your customers will be able to talk directly to your suppliers. It could be a bad thing, because if they figure out we don't need you, we'll just talk directly to your supplier. That could be a bad thing. You know, you in the center could go away. So on the one hand, we want this. On the other hand, we've got to be careful that we don't make the organization irrelevant in the middle. So Amazon.com uses a system that makes it easy for the suppliers to display goods and open stores on Amazon's site. Now, Amazon has a store itself. Why would they make it easier for others to compete with them? Well, they've got this great platform for opening stores. Yes, there's going to be stores that sell the same things they sell. Amazon was traditionally a bookseller, right? If you go into Amazon.com now, there's all kinds of booksellers. Small ones, large ones, Amazon itself. They make it easy for customers to pay for goods. They coordinate the shipments of goods. They track shipments for customers. So they will supply you, Amazon.com that is, with the wherewithal in order to do what they do very, very well. Why would they do this? They're not giving it away, right? That's why they do it. They're not giving it away. You can't establish a store for free. Every one of these services is charged. You want to set up a store? There's a charge for that. You want to make it easier for customers to pay for goods? We'll handle that transaction and take a piece. You want to coordinate shipping using our system? We'll take a piece of that action too. You want to allow your customers to track shipments? We'll enable that on our platform, but we want some revenue for doing that. So that's why they're doing it, right? They've got this great platform that they decided, hey, why don't we open it up? Let others use it. But let's charge for doing that. So now you have kind of a Porter model kind of on steroids here, called the value web. So yeah, it's still kind of a Porter model, right? It's still the industry and firms battling it out in the center with suppliers, customers, and partner firms and indirect suppliers. These are new to the model.